Hello there everybody and welcome to today's video, and in this one we're going to be doing a walkthrough of Stadium Bravo, the map being reintroduced into Siege, being brought into the ranked pool for the upcoming season. We're going to jump in, go through every objective, discuss some ideas, and hopefully relearn the map in time for the new season. Alrighty, here we are then for what will probably be the primary objective on this map, which is Armory Archives. And if those names sound familiar, it's because they are. This stadium map is a hybrid of a couple of different maps, as we'll work our way through. We'll work out what they are. First one, though, off the bat, Border. This is the primary objective on Border. And back when this map was in for the SI game mode, I distinctively remember this one being quite popular as well. It shares a very, very similar layout with half wall. You have the main breach, you have the small office, sandwich. I mean, it's all there. All the way through to the same line of sight in towards archives. As we've seen though with Border, as that objective has matured, this is quite a difficult objective to deal with. Especially when you consider how exposed outside is to a multitude of deep angles and the angle here on the staircase. Making sure that you keep this wall closed is going to be pretty important in being able to win out this objective. There are a couple of different things you can do in terms of denying the actual plant itself, with lines of sight here through small office. And of course you want to be holding deep here over towards half wall as well. I don't think there's really too much to dive into, as this objective is played out a lot. So you can very much implement the same theory as you would to a regular border defense. Now, office itself is basically the same as well. Some slight variants here or there, and you do have to try and cover a little bit more of the map over here, unlike Border, which has east stairs and doesn't have all these play areas. You actually find yourself in hookah now, so coastline hybrid on this map. And you may want to extend out here as a defender. You could even be really aggressive here with an entry point in towards office itself, for example. That way you can just branch out a little bit and really force the attack to funnel in through the main breach. The other thing to keep in mind when defending Armory is that it's a little bit more tricky to hold what would on Border be CCTV, in this case Penthouse, and play that outside rotation that you might otherwise want to. You are forced into this really long run out, which you're not going to make that run. You can't see the timer because I've got it off on the HUD, but it's not like Border where you have the wall straight here, you can apply pressure and hold CCTV. And I think that's what makes this particular site actually quite weak, is that the extensions aren't really that powerful, and it forces you into these sorts of chokes back towards site. So if the attack does get a decent foothold in towards the breach, if you lose a player half full, you lose a player sandwich, you're getting pressured from the rappel, you're going to keep getting forced back and back and back, and the ability to retake here is really quite poor. So I don't envision Armory being a very good site on this map. I think it will get played a lot, but over time, I don't think it's going to be particularly popular. Alrighty, now we find ourselves in Penthouse and VIP. So not Penthouse Theater like on Coastline, it's actually Penthouse and VIP. As you can see, the layout of Pent very, very similar. Of course, Theater doesn't exist. That leads down to a staircase, but you have a window that you need to deal with. The bed as you would expect it, and then if we open up the wall here into VIP, you'll see that this is where the second site does take place. Now this one I think is probably going to be one of the least popular sites to defend, namely because of this window here being so powerful. As an attacker, you can try and get in, go for a plan on this concrete wall. It does limit the ability quite significantly for the defense to try and actually defend against that, because getting lines of sight on the window is quite tricky, and holding this hallway will be tough because there's a real lack of cover. Now, there are a couple of different ideas you can implement into this defense, and I think the main one is going to be trying to just spread your wings as much as possible and create a lot of extensions outside of the site, because as you can see, there is a real lack of cover literally anywhere on this objective. Everywhere you stand, you're going to be exposed somewhere, whether it be to a window or the drop down from bathroom. You have the exterior door here for where guitar otherwise would be. And of course you have the window in towards VIP as well. And there's just very little wriggle room where you can sort of sit around. As you can see, you're just constantly going to be exposed to different angles. So I think this site is going to be very reliant on teams that can try and hold the hallways as much as possible and deny entry itself in towards the objective. That, of course, though, is going to be quite weak against teams that actually try and clear it if they go from office across, for example, and flush out these players. So in general, at the moment, my gut feeling is telling me that this site is probably one to be avoided, perhaps even completely. The one good thing that it does have going its way is actually some vertical potential. So a lot of the floor on both sides is destructible, so you can try to lean into that for the denial in towards site. That isn't the case for Hall of Fame. That is a solid floor, so you won't be able to easily deny players pressuring this window. And it's not like you can pressure it from this wall either, because you're just going to be exposed to the hatch up above. So it's a bit of a weird one, this site. As we saw in the actual coastline map, Penthouse Theatre, very popular, then it dropped off. Penthouse VIP, I think, is probably going to be even weaker. And it's not like VIP has the new exterior wall that we now have on coastline. If it had that, perhaps it would be even worse. But I think at the moment it's just not going to be particularly favorable, mainly due to the configuration of these sites offering pretty minimal cover and the extensions needed to alleviate that pressure being tricky to hold from the map sweep. Alright, find ourselves on the third objective now, and this one is server, and if we make our way over here, shower. So again, we find ourselves back on border, and I think this one is probably the sleeper objective of everyone on the map. This one offers quite a bit of protection. You can see showers is actually got a lot of different avenues in which you can defend it. You only have a single window to worry about, and then you can either extend and play aggressively here on the double wall, or you could try and play some form of denial here. Again, keeping in mind that the window may expose that. So showers itself is going to be an interesting one. You also have this weird dynamic on Stadium with these bulletproof see-through windows, so that as well is going to be a spanner in the works. And you do have this big wall between the objectives. You can open that up as you typically would on a site like this, and then you can reinforce off these exterior walls or even extend into what is a lobby on border. This area of the map is very open, very exposed. It's probably not where you want to find yourself as a defender. And then you have the vents room to worry about, which, again, very little in the way of cover, and that wall could be a bit of a nuisance, so that's something that you'll need to keep in mind. I think this is going to play out somewhat similar to the border of the current age, where you'll want to try and hold up above. There is some vert potential that you can use in denying vents, and you could also try to deny some of the defaults on site. Instead of having a focus on an archives hold up above, for instance, you may want to focus more of your efforts here on office. And that can be achieved by reinforcing or playing aggressively here on the wall. The attackers only have the hatch, which you could quite easily lock down, and the window to worry about. You may need to be somewhat cautious about hookah and not allowing free control over there. But if you as a defender can hold up above here, prevent vert, maybe even play into it yourself, you can see just how much versatility is on offer here. A lot of the site is exposed to vertical play. So I think that this site, especially early on in the map's life cycle, is one that if you go to it and play it well on the vert, you're going to catch a lot of teams off guard. You can see just every corner of this objective is exposed to vert. There is nowhere safe that you will be able to sit. You can also get vert looking down to the window, for instance, as well. So you can pressure that position, pressure the doorway as well. And it continues on here inside of server. Looking up that roof, basically all of it is going to be exposed. Again, I don't think there's anywhere you can sit realistically and not be exposed to vert. So holding up above is going to be king. You just got to be careful of the direct points of entry. Any pressure early on from vents, for example. I think this wall could be a weakness, as it's going to soak up a lot of reinforcements if you want to cut it off. But yeah, in general, I think this is the site that you want to go to and you want to learn early. Because teams aren't going to know how to attack it very well. And even those that might read into vert being important, you should be able to set up a roam to counter that. Alrighty guys, so as I was editing this video, I had a little bit of an epiphany about an idea and a concept that you can abuse in multiple parts of this map, and I'm showing it right now. That is setting up drones through these one-way bulletproof angles. You can get such a great line of sight in towards the objective, and perhaps this is going to reinforce defenders having to play very strong roams here, because playing on site, even putting the vert aside, is going to be tough due to the amount of information that the attackers can gather. And just to quickly prove my point that this isn't the only place you can do this, there's plenty of others. We'll go upstairs real quick. And here's just another example. Set it up over here on this office hookah rotation. This could be useful if the attackers are above, or perhaps they're defending archives and they're really aggressive here on the east. These are plotted all around the map. And I think that this is probably going to be the easiest and also most powerful way for attackers to gain really strong information on rotations. So before other players start doing this, make sure you get ahead of the curve early, do this, and your team's going to love you. Alrighty, we move on to the final objective on the map, and this one, much like upstairs in Armory, is very similar to a map already in the game, Coastline. Doesn't stray too far away from that formula. It is kitchen and service, and as you can see, it looks very, very familiar. Now, there have been some minor adjustments compared to actual Coastline. For instance, it doesn't have the singular window here. Arguably, the protection here inside of barrels is a little bit different. You also have this sort of right corner you can hide in inside of kitchen as well, so that's kind of cool to note. But the vert itself, again, very, very prevalent, so you can pressure the window. You can't pressure service entry though. Outside of the vert you could previously do inside of Penthouse, so you can still do that. Now, the one thing really to note as an attacker when you're trying to funnel service is this big concrete pillar here. It makes for a pretty awkward stack outside the doorway, and unlike actual Coastline where you can rotate around, it's just not the case here. So not only is it a slower route around, but it also means you're going to be stacked outside the door. So you will need to be really careful of utility play in that instance. And as I mentioned here, the rotation is a little bit different around outside. You're forced to go all the way down and around. So the timing is not going to be near as quick as it would be on normal Coastline. In terms of the rest of the default setup, the lines of sight from Courtyard are a little bit different because Courtyard itself does not exist. But this might mean that we get to see a little bit more freedom from defenders roaming inside of lobby here. The one thing that really irks me about the site on Coastline is that how exposed Courtyard is, and you can't really maneuver around and go for a lot of horizontal extensions, whereas here that's not really the case. I could envision barrels, for instance, being opened here. This exposes the entire site. It would force the attackers to get control of server so that they can nullify this cross. I would also anticipate that play up above will again be relatively important. This is where the hatch drops down in towards a lobby, slightly different position to where it is on the regular map. And the walls is soft. As I saw before, you can still get that line of sight over towards service door. And you can get vert over towards kitchen window as well as the doorway that you typically would be able to. So I think this objective will play out somewhat similar, but the big difference is going to be the lack of courtyard. The inclusion of border lobby means that as a defender, you have a little bit more freedom as to how you can play around here. There's a lot of entry points that the attack can use against you, so I expect barricades and util to be important so that you don't get caught off guard. But just think about the amount of power you can achieve from this lobby position. You can basically see into every single site. The window is obscured by the pillar, at least somewhat. I mean, you can still see it on some peaks. So I think defending kitchen is going to come down to actually probably extending into lobby and making use of that and not giving free entry to the attack. And if you do that, you'll probably find some success. So another objective where you can innovate and push the limits a little bit without being too crazy. And I think in the first couple of weeks, you're going to catch teams off guard. So that will conclude this quick little breakdown of Stadium. Not too in depth. I think as the map develops, I might come back and actually do some like full serious breakdowns or setups. This was more so just a reintroduction to the map. You're not going to be able to avoid it. With 5 maps now being a part of the ranked ban phase, chances are you're going to play this map at least a couple of times in your first 50. So be prepared for it. Study up. Make sure you're ready. I think it's a pretty fun map. It's certainly a nice little hybrid and a good way to mix up the ranked experience. So let me know in the comments how you go. Are you looking forward to the map? Maybe you're watching this with the map already out. How are you finding it? Like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.